Hi everyone, this is General Rajiv from PH Expertise. Today we have special guest Dr. Sherli Koshy-Chenthittayil. And Shirley graduated from Mahatma Gandhi University in India with a bachelor and master degree of science in mathematics and also a master degree of education in mathematics. She then went to US to Clemson University to complete her master and PhD in applied mathematics. Currently, she's a postdoc at University of Connecticut Health Center. And welcome to the program, Shirley.
Thank you both for having me, and it's a pleasure to be here.
I will start with the first question about your journey coming from India to the US. So you study at one of the top universities in South India, Mahatma Gandhi University. Can you give the overview of the process you used for choosing your school of choice?
So I was very strategic about choosing a particular school in the States. One was I looked at the ranking of the schools with regards to my department, to the math department. And then I also was quite sure I did not want to go in the top tiers. So I did not want to go in the first 20 universities. I preferred a smaller department and preferably more one-to-one interactions with my possibly future advisor. So in that sense, I was very strategic with that. So I did one university in the top tier and 3 to 4 universities in the 20 to 50 range. And then I just did that. I did like 5 universities, and I made sure that my admissions essay was tailored to that particular university and to that particular department. Since I was going into a math department, which is purely a service department in most universities, I didn't really have to look for a research fellowship. I was looking for a teaching fellowship because I love teaching. So I really wanted to make sure that I had both teaching as well as research. So in that sense, my application packet was a little less intense because I didn't have to worry about future research. I just had to get in and then decide what I wanted to do research in.
Yeah, that's kind of different from some other disciplines. You completed your PhD at Clemson University. You gave some highlights of your research project and also can talk about the style of your research group.
Okay, so Clemson University, so I did my PhD in Clemson from 2013 to 2017. So I kind of sped through the process a little bit. In Clemson, what we have to do is we have to do our qualifying exams, and then we decide which advisor we want to go with and what's the project we want to do. I was quite sure that I wanted to do applied math, and I specifically wanted to do mathematical biology, so which is the application of math to understand biological systems. My research group actually only consisted of my advisor and myself. So it was a very small, close-knit group. And for that, I'm quite grateful for that. And so what we did was, and even the kind of systems that I studied were ordinary differential equations, so a lot of calc, so a lot of calculus, but it wasn't something that she was actually currently doing research in. It was something that she had done research in her undergrad. And she very graciously let me do research in that, in the sense that she was like, this is interesting. I want to know more. Let's learn some more about this topic. So we learned together while I was doing my PhD. The project was about investigating whether chaos is good for the system. So we would push the system into chaos in the sense, people might have heard of the butterfly effect. Like if a butterfly flaps its wings, there's a tornado somewhere, it will lead to a tornado somewhere. So that's a very common thing to use when we talk about chaos. So it's just, I would investigate whether a particular ODE system had chaotic behavior. And if it did, it's not bad. The species won't die out. And let me show you how they don't die out. That was my primary research project. And if I want to talk about my PhD experience in Clemson, I would also like to include that I did serve in the graduate student government. I was director of research initiatives, and I also served in the outreach committee. So there was a significant service part of my role as well for my PhD. So I did a lot of outreach projects, and I also was very interested in increasing access to STEM for students with disabilities. The reason being because I'm a wheelchair user, I wanted to kind of advocate for myself as well as for other students with disabilities. So I got involved with projects that included access to students with disabilities. So in that sense, I also got involved with the Clemson's Accessibility Commission, and we were able to get like push buttons for certain doors which were not there before. So I think my PhD career was both research as well as service. And then, of course, teaching was definitely there because I was a graduate teacher of record. I had good training in all three fields, like in research, in teaching, as well as in service. And so it was more spread out, I would say, the experience. It wasn't only focused on research.
Okay. Oh, that totally makes sense. Could you elaborate a little bit? That's really interesting, the differential equations portion and chaos in the system. So what is, in practicality, like, does that mean you were solving systems of differential equations and you were trying to find a point of chaos, or what was that like?
Yes, definitely. So it was very similar to that in the sense that we would use the differential equations and kind of calculate something called a Lyapunov exponent, which would, if it is positive, it indicates chaos. So I used MATLAB to estimate the exponent. And then what I would do is I would use concepts from control theory to push the system into something called permanence, which just means that the species don't die out and that they're at a safe threshold from extinction. So I studied three systems, which were mostly predator-prey models. I used MATLAB to kind of investigate it in all three fronts, like for chaos, for permanence, and for the control theory bit. And what I mean by chaos is that if you change the initial condition of a system, it will go in another trajectory.
That totally makes sense. I've had experiences trying to solve systems of partial differential equations where changing initial conditions will make the solution not real, or so it seems like a very practical problem to be able to address a lot of practical applications, which is great for research work. Awesome, great. The next question we have is, you talked already a little bit about this, the education, instruction, research practices, but like, could you talk a little bit more about that? Seems like it's a large component of the PhD work you did and the work you're doing now to some extent, right?
Yes. So a little bit of history about that is, so it started when a colleague and I from the graduate student government, we were in a STEM policy class together. So we had a STEM education policy class together, and we had a project at the end of the semester. So both of us decided we wanted to do something about increasing access to STEM for students with disabilities. And she actually finished her PhD with science curriculum instruction from Clemson. And then that group has actually grown to include another mathematician from Clemson. And so what we did in that project was we came up with a framework to describe how universities should be when they want to include students with disabilities. So we were able to publish that paper with that framework, where we also presented it at a conference. And it was basically that universities need to be more proactive to become more inclusive for students with disabilities, as opposed to most universities are very reactive in the sense that they will wait for the student with the disability to come into the university, make some requests for accommodations, and then definitely do the needful to make sure that the student gets the required accommodations. But sometimes it's better to just be proactive, and that policy can be applied, I think, not only in the universities, but also in industry as well as government. But for now, we're starting with the universities. Additional work that we are doing for this project is kind of analyzing data. So we are analyzing longitudinal data on how students with disabilities fare in the higher education system. So we're actually using like 2 longitudinal data sets, and we have some summer interns who are helping us with analyzing this data using R. So we're kind of looking at the trajectory of students with disabilities in the STEM field over decades, like over the 1980s to 2000s and then 2000s to 2020.
Okay, well, that makes sense. And what do you think what's kind of the overall goal or message that you want to get across? I'm sure you have some hypotheses about what those trends have been. What would be the big insight from your work you're expecting to achieve?
What we're hoping to achieve is that, has anything changed since the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act? So the first data set that we looked at was 1980s to 2000. So it was just when the ADA had passed. So maybe there wasn't a lot of effect of it. But we are expecting that maybe the trend has changed in the aughts, in the early aughts. But preliminary data is not very encouraging, that students with disabilities are, in fact, not included in the conversation in the universities, as well as there might be recruiting, but there's retention might not be there. So initial data analysis is a little disappointing, but our objectives is to kind of take this framework and present it to the universities in a way that, with the data, show that, hey, there is a reason why we want you to adapt this framework. Or maybe it may not be university-wide, but maybe department-wide, or maybe class-wide. So we're going to start slow and then go up the ladder, I guess.
Yeah, no, and that's great. That's a lot of great impact that you could potentially have. So I'm really encouraged to hear that. That's really good. We haven't talked about your current role yet, and we're really interested in hearing about that at UConn at the health center. What type of work are you focused on these days?
My postdoc is only research, so I don't have teaching responsibilities, and I do have mentoring responsibilities in the summer. But project that I'm currently involved in is I use mathematics to model biofilms. Common biofilm is plaque, like dental plaque. So we actually work with dentists at the Department of Oral Health and a microbiologist, and we use their experiments to inform our model. So it's an agent-based model, it's based in Java, and I've used an existing software and kind of modified it to our purposes. And we are investigating how a fungus and two bacteria interact within a biofilm. We kind of want to see, like, okay, how can we kill the fungus by using the bacteria?
No, that's it's kind of counterintuitive to think about keeping bacteria around, but that's but some of them, like one of them is a probiotic, so there'll be some advantages of it, but I think the objective is that because the fungus is more virulent and more poisonous, I guess, to the body, we're like, which one do we prefer? So we want to use the bacteria to kind of control the fungus, would be the right word. Makes sense. And can you briefly talk about how this role is different from a traditional postdoc position at a university?
This is different in the sense that I am not associated with the math department. So I'm associated with the public health, like our School of Medicine. So in that sense, that my postdoc is very applied and there's no teaching responsibilities. That's one thing. And there's a difference that comes with doing a postdoc in a department that is not yours. I am more used to a math department, so there's not a lot of like, when you're in a department which is very different from yours, you have to learn all the terminology with regards to the biology, with regards to the microbiology. And so you tend to shift your focus on what's important. Simple example is when you present. When you're presenting to a math department, you are presenting tons of equations, proofs, theorems, that's what you're presenting. But when you're presenting to biologists or microbiologists, their eyes glaze over when you show the equations. So they're like, could you dumb it down, or could you simplify this for us because we don't understand all the math? So there's a lot of pictures. You learn a lot about data visualization, and you learn a lot about how to present your work to a non-mathematical field. So in that sense, I've learned a lot from this postdoc in the way I present my work.
Yeah, it's good to have all those types of skills. And this is actually a good transition to our last question. A lot of our audience are PhD students thinking about their next moves. What advice, lessons would you give through your years of experience that you've had to them to help them do better in the things that they want to do?
Whatever job you're searching for, or whatever career path you wish to choose, you have to be excited about it. Because, and I know it's a hard ask because some jobs are just boring. That's fine. That's okay. But there must be some aspect of that job that you enjoy. Because if we don't find that, it's going to be a really hard ask to stay in that job. And then also when you're searching for your job, it is very hard. And I heard this, someone had said this, if you don't put out what is best in you, that's a loss to the world. So when you're presenting yourself during your interviews, be confident in what you have. You have a PhD or you have a master's or whatever degree you have, you've gotten there with a lot of work and a lot of toiling. So feel free to put that out there. And also another thing is that when you're searching for jobs, it's okay to go off the usual. For example, my job, like it's a postdoc, which is usually not that popular in math departments because math departments usually, if you're going for a tenure track position, you don't really need to do a postdoc. But I wanted to do it because I wanted research experience. So similarly, if you want teaching experience, go and teach, like be a lecturer for some years if you want the teaching experience, or tutor. That would be also another option. But if you don't want the teaching experience, go right for the research and go to a postdoc, go as a research assistant professor, or go as a research scientist. In a lot of nonprofits ask for research scientists. So those are the options, and you need not make that decision the final year of your PhD, but it's something you can think about, and it's okay to not be normal in your trajectory, because my career trajectory was not the usual. After I did my master's and my bachelor's in education, I actually worked for 10 years before I came here. So it wasn't the usual, okay, master's, then PhD, then career, and so on. And I know it's not a very popular opinion, but hey, after your PhD, if you need to take a year to just decompress, please go ahead and do it, because it is a stressful degree, and no one should tell you that it isn't.
That's so true. Well, everyone, we want to thank Sherli for joining us today, providing as many insights as she did. And we want to thank everyone for watching this program. And if you have any questions for Sherli or us, please contact us at PhDexpertise@gmail.com, and we will be back with our next episode. Thanks, Sherli.
Thank you.